finally here. You've finally arrived. You've at last found the one place which holds the answers to the questions of the ages. You're excited. Your heart palpitates. Is it real? Can it be true? You're understandably hesitant, yet determinedly hopeful. That is good. Your faith in such matters will be rewarded. You'll not find pat and cliched answers here, no! Here is a place of clarity, of definition, of explanation, of truth. Here combines science and religion, removes tradition and replaces it with fact. Here the universe is holographic, yet tangible, ethereal, yet substantive. Here is a place where time is understood as atemporal. Here there is harmony amidst chaos. Here is where the darkened glass is finally cleared. Here is where you'll find the answers to all the unanswered questions which stretch across the cosmos.
And you are across the cosmos for the next hour. I am Chase Rockwell. I am your host. I am joined in studio once again by my co-hosts,
Lou Rogers,
Mark Wilson,
and we're going to go right to this.
Are we on?
We're on, Mr. President.
Our missiles have failed. The comets are still headed for Earth, and there's nothing we can do to stop them. So this is it. If the world does go on, it will not go on for everyone. We have now been able to calculate the comets' final trajectories. We have determined where they're going to strike. The smaller of the two comets, Biedermann, will hit first. Somewhere along the Atlantic seaboard, probably in the waters off the coast of Cape Hatteras, in just under 12 hours at 4:35 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The impact of the comet is going to be, well, disastrous. There will be a very large tidal wave moving quickly through the Atlantic Ocean. It'll be 100 feet high, traveling at 1,100 miles an hour. It's faster than the speed of sound. As the wave reaches shallow water, it's going to slow down, but the wave height, depending on the depth of the shelf off the coast, will be anywhere from 1,000 to 3,500 feet high. Where the land is flat, the wave will wash inland 600 to 700 miles. The wave will hit our nation's capital 40 minutes after impact. New York City, Boston, Atlanta, Philadelphia, all will be destroyed. If you have any means of getting away from the path of this wave.
There is little doubt that one book within the biblical canonical scriptures which is most misunderstood is the book of Revelation. This very last book of the New Testament has so much contained within it that there is no way one or even a 2-hour podcast is going to cover all the information. However, one cannot discuss the subject of survivalists and the apocalypse without also bringing up this mysterious book. And that is our subject for this edition of Across the Cosmos, survivalists and their review of the coming apocalypse. I will admit right from the start that this is a subject totally foreign to me. It isn't that I don't give the apocalypse any thought. It is more a matter of priorities. As I recall, Jesus Christ told us not to worry about tomorrow, as today has enough trouble of its own. However, does that mean we shouldn't take any precautions about the coming apocalypse whatsoever? I suppose for me personally the answer becomes a matter of what precautions one believes are the most important. While it may sound too pragmatic for some, there is the naked fact that regardless what we do in order to survive, we're all going to die eventually. I would like to believe that I will die attempting to fulfill the primary mission which Christ gave me. Go forth and make disciples of all nations. Too hacky? Too cliche? Perhaps. 15 years ago, there was a moderate scare which rippled through the world respecting all of our computer systems, and the looming specter of the calendar year 2000. Because many of these systems were initially written in early computer languages such as COBOL or RPG. On systems where memory storage was hugely, expensive. Bad habits with respect to keeping costs down were adopted and became part of the programming culture. One of the habits, which really wasn't bad, was to write code as lean as possible due to the huge cost of data storage. Programmers wrote the date to include only the last 2 digits of the year, discounting the century. Thus, whether it was 1960, 2060, or even 2160, the code was written to just designate 60. This wasn't seen as a pressing issue at the time because it was presumed correctly that better code would eventually supplant the older code, and any corrective measures could be written out at that point. However, few programmers and code writers figured into their work the frugal nature of company administrators. Many of these businesses and organizations hung onto their computer systems, including the outdated software, like grim death. Such institutions as the IRS are prime examples. One company I hired into in 2005 was still using an IBM mainframe computer installed in 1975. To combat Y2K, they simply wrote workarounds and the system continued to operate. Not well, as I personally could attest, but good enough for them to stay in business. That system was not scrapped and replaced until 2008. That programmers and computer scientists were aware of this problem all along is a given. A good programmer thinks many steps ahead and learns to anticipate potential problems with their code. Proper planning helps to make fixing potential bugs easier. However, even the best programmers cannot anticipate the changes which will occur over a span of 40 years. You learn to work with what you have at the time. Suffice to say, the world at large, not computer programmers, not coders, had no idea of what was lurking in these massive computer mainframes and millions of pieces of firmware. Was this really truly a ticking time bomb or merely a harmless puff of smoke? Well, only time was going to tell. Now, it wasn't until New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan issued a report on the subject in 1996, 4 years from 2000, that any official action was taken to seriously assess the problem. That report of Moynihan's blew the lid off the lurking secret, in the burgeoning internet world went wild, as did the media. Y2K became a part of the popular lexicon, striking fear into the hearts of many adults. We were besieged with apocalyptic images of trains derailing, planes crashing, nuclear power plants melting down, dams bursting, and the power grid completely failing, leaving us mired in the Stone Age overnight. Wholesale chaos was sold to us by experts who didn't actually know the difference between an if statement with an else clause from that of an algorithm. The irony is that today most teenagers are only scarcely aware of the potential doomsday, and they usually laugh at the gullible adults when they learn the details. Now, Y2K was a complete bust. Yet despite the failure of Y2K to bring about the apocalypse, survivalist mentality has not gone away. In fact, it has only grown. The growth of the internet has given many people a voice who had no voice before. It has also given people an idea just how many others think exactly the way they do. They find kindred spirits. And this is both a good thing and a bad thing. While it is good to share ideas with one another without the agenda-driven hand of the government or the media, too much erroneous information is also being propagated as fact. Now that last fact is one of the main reasons we are here at Across the Cosmos. We invite you all to listen, to check out our assertions for yourselves. Don't trust us. We aim to bring you as accurate information as possible, but we also trust you won't take anyone's word blindly, not even ours. With the internet having given people a way to connect and communicate, a survivalist culture has only grown. The biblical apocalypse is certainly a part of the engine driving this ideology. But so is the political and social unrest most people see unfolding worldwide, right before their very eyes. A recent article in Forbes magazine detailed how the super-rich are taking matters of survival into their own hands. These people with millions of disposable dollars are building futuristic bunkers so as not only to protect themselves from growing civil unrest, but against the coming apocalypse. Shades of the 1950s when bomb shelter business was in full bloom and received a big boost in sales later in 1961 due to the bungled Cuban Missile Crisis. As a people, it seems we really don't trust our governments to protect us too well, do we? Those without disposable millions to spend on security have taken other measures to ensure they'll survive whatever God or the government throws at them. Large camps situated in the woods and away from urban centers have grown in recent decades. Much like the feudal kingdoms of the mid-first millennium, these camps generally have one ruler, and he rules absolute. They have no shortage of weapons, and they know a thing or two about living off the land. People who choose to live in this manner are generally pretty resourceful, and they also are very protective of their own. But are these people really doing what is necessary to survive an apocalypse? If one truly believes the biblical scriptures, one must concede the entire world is to eventually be destroyed. Can a concrete bunker really serve as an adequate protection against such a situation? Are survivalists really going to survive? And how are Christians supposed to face such an eventuality? Should we flee to the mountains as Christ seems to suggest in the Gospel of Matthew? Or should we embrace certain death, as he also seems to suggest in the Gospel of Matthew? Clip from Deep Impact illustrated the total annihilation of the planet just due to a comet. It's prophesied that God is going to destroy the entire heavens and the earth, remake them anew. I hardly think that a survivalist in a concrete bunker is going to fare well under such circumstances. So, I now turn to my esteemed panel, my co-hosts, to get their impressions on all of this. What are we doing? Are we wasting our time? Are we really believing in the total apocalypse, the total annihilation of Earth? Or is this just another in a number of stopgap measures? Are we being prudent by building these camps, by building these bunkers, by staving off the rabble?
My personal opinion is, multifold. I see nothing wrong with a family having a 30-day supply of dried food and water to support that family should some form of natural disaster beset them for a limited time. 30 days is a nice round number. Whether it's a week, 2 weeks, you have more than enough to get your family through the emergency. To me, that's only prudent and basically smart enough to be prepared.
All right, but
the concept of staving off a worldwide apocalypse, let's say the volcano under Yosemite Park,
the caldera,
decides to erupt.
No, you said Yosemite. I thought you meant Yellowstone.
Yes. Should that happen, most of the West Coast is really going to be kind of gone. We're going to be covered in ash. Very, very thick. Very heavy. We're kind of going to be like Pompeii. How are we going to survive that? I don't care how deep your bunker is.
All right, you mentioned Yosemite and that. The caldera under Yellowstone is huge, massive. It encompasses several states.
It's the largest volcano.
Were that to go off, Washington D.C. is in a puddle of molten lava.
Very much so.
They anticipate that there would be a nuclear winter that would pretty much kill off most of life, just because of the devastation. We've not seen in modern times the effects of a caldera because nothing like that has ever gone off. And, it's mere speculation that it would erupt like a normal volcano would, like, for instance, Mount St. Helens anyway.
Absolutely. We have no idea.
Some geologists think that it would just suddenly sink. And, you'd have a huge pool of molten lava, several states in diameter. I don't know. I know that it would be a bad thing. But one thing's for a given. Let's suppose you have a bunker shelter someplace not too far from Yellowstone. It's down 20 feet deep, and you've got lead-lined walls and the whole bit, concrete.
Fantastic.
And all of a sudden, the ground sinks below you.
All of a sudden,
you're plunged 300 feet down into molten lava.
Exactly.
You really going to be protected?
Or let's run it this way: you survive, and 15 feet of ash now covers the entrance to
and it's hardened like brick
to your bunker.
Now you're Herculaneum.
Right.
You're lost for when did they first rediscover Herculaneum? Was it
Oh, that was...
Latter part of the 19th century?
Yes.
It was a long time.
I'd have to do a quick Google search on that.
It was thought to be a myth until he stumbled across it.
Exactly so. And we have this whole problem of this idea that we can survive things if we prepare for them. As you pointed out, Chase, all of us at one point or another are going to become room temperature. You cannot escape death in this world.
You were about to say something.
Oh, there's the end time scenarios, the apocalyptic scenarios are far greater in number than just the scenario pointed out by the book of Revelation.
Sure.
As you mentioned, a volcanic eruption. We've also, in that movie clip you just showed, we're talking about an asteroid possibly hitting the Earth, and we would be
a Texas-sized asteroid.
Yeah, and but there's also other problems. One, there's been some recent books written, and since we learned about EMPs in both science fiction and in practicality, that they learned that if you detonate an atomic warhead a certain amount of miles up in our atmosphere, it would totally knock out the entire power grid of any nation.
We learned that at the time it was called the Manhattan Project.
Well, yeah. So what people are doing is as we become more aware as a world, we are rich with knowledge, but with that knowledge brings a lot of fears. And we realize the precarious ledge that we sit on as a people. We're afraid of our government. We notice that there's FEMA camps being constructed and freeways that we're not allowed to go on that are for moving large amounts of militia. People fear those. They fear that we'll become a state that is a police state.
Well,
those are valid fears.
That's a very good valid
even
fear.
Recent history underscores that possibility.
Well, so when you have on one side a misunderstanding of the book of Revelation that's been propagated for well over 1,000 years, the misunderstanding of that book, and that's something we should delve into in a future
we're going to
podcast to explain why.
I have a feeling we're going to be swimming in that pool
tonight. But even if you put those types aside, and you go with the people that fear the government, there's a growing number of people that, disagree with the government, loathe the government, and fear the government. And so they like to go out, because we still live in a free country. You can buy property out in the middle of nowhere, and you can set up whatever type of group colony you want to.
Okay, within reason. You're certainly familiar with Randy Weaver and the whole situation with Ruby Ridge, Idaho.
I would say I'm more familiar with that than a lot of people. I've done a lot of research on that particular issue.
And it was later found out that the government, the ATF specifically, nailed him in a sting, got him to buy illegal shotguns, which is what precipitated...
Nailed him, no, entrapment.
It was entrapment. It was entrapment.
It was pure out entrapment.
And after they destroyed his family, he ended up winning a multi-million-dollar suit against the government. No easy task.
Right.
So there is good reason for us to fear the government.
Well, when you say destroy his family, I want to bring our listeners, because some of our listeners don't know the story. Oh, the man was a white supremacist. And while I disagree with his personal views, that this is America and we all have a right to our personal views.
What's the difference between a white supremacist and the BET channel?
Not much.
Or I'm going to screw this up. I'll just say Univision.
Nothing.
Wait a second. If there's white supremacists, just to interject here,
yes.
Are there black supremacists?
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
But they don't go by that name because politically correct, it's improper to point that out.
That's racist!
Oh, well, what do they do?
Well,
What do you mean?
I mean,
they often stand...
what handle do they go by?
Black Panthers is one of their names.
Well, that's pretty old.
Well, that's to the extreme. Here's the problem, and I don't mean to digress into race, because really we do need to do a show on that. But
Very much so.
I don't like the term race or racist for a very specific reason, which I was just talking with you, Lou, about a little bit earlier. It's an inaccurate term. Ethnicity would probably be more accurate. We're all the human race.
Exactly.
And we all have different, not all, we are broken up into different ethnicities.
if you take my DNA and a man's whose skin's color is 20 shades darker and 20 shades lighter, we still have the same DNA. We have different genetic markers that make the pigment of our skin change. But that means nothing in reality.
But any human being is capable of mixing with any other human being.
Exactly.
We are all human race.
Hence, we are all the same species.
And it is extraordinarily, in my opinion, now this is my opinion, ignorant, juvenile, backwards to separate people based upon ethnicity.
It's a very big misunderstanding.
Even Martin Luther King himself said, do not judge a man by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. And it seems that lately, race baiting has become a whole little cottage industry. So, yeah, while we can agree that Randy Weaver had his rights violated tremendously by the United States government.
What they did. Let's remember, a FBI sniper shot Randy Weaver's wife holding his 2-year-old son,
exactly,
saying she had an AK-47, killing both the wife and the child.
Yes.
And that was what the potential of the lawsuit was
Why
about.
would they do that?
Because they were held up in his house that was off the grid and refusing to come out. They said, this is our property. You can't come here.
Ah.
So when you say that it is a free country and that we can still buy land and what have you, that's not necessarily true according to the federal government, which has a different idea of what is free and what is not free. Speaking of Randy Weaver, there is an article here from the Wall Street Journal dated June 30th, 1995. It was 3 years after the event, and I don't know if I want to read the whole thing, but
Good.
It is...
Yeah.
It is pertinent because even by 1995, most everyone was aware of the fact that this was a botched raid from the very get-go. It was instigated by then Attorney General Janet Reno, who covered up and precipitated really the whole move.
Janet Reno was well known for trying to crush freedoms.
Oh, sure. Much the same way our present outgoing Attorney General, Eric Holder, has done the same thing.
Well, just look at her record. First, we have Ruby Ridge, which is what we are talking about, and then we have Waco, Texas,
which came a year later.
A year later.
Yeah, a year later.
Right. And on the idea of Waco, Texas, well, I think
April
Koresh was probably a loon. He was American. He had a right to hold his church and have fellow believers join with him. This crime was having too many weapons not registered.
Yes and no. Okay, here's my problem with the Koresh incident.
Keep in mind the sheriff's exact words were, if the ATF wanted to arrest him, they could have called me because I could walk in there and arrest him.
Not only that,
I met with him for coffee every week.
Exactly. Koresh was routinely going into town by himself, leaving his... And just so the listeners understand, I'm well aware that David Koresh was a cult leader, that he was doing little girls.
We're not disputing
and
that.
had multiple wives, and none of which had probably seen their 20th birthday. I get all of that, and I get that the Waco, Texas compound had some problems, but we also have laws which govern that. You don't trample on the Constitution in order to enforce laws, because when you do that, you nullify the very basis of the Constitution, which is to support and uphold the law.
One quick interjection.
Jump in.
In all of these decisions that were made by the government and the problems that occurred and the lawsuits and the sensationalism, all it did was manufacture more fear.
Exactly.
So
that's what it was meant to do.
But on the heels of all this...
This is similar to being at the time of Christ and walking from Judah to Jerusalem and seeing bodies crucified. It's the government's way of saying, do not screw with us or we will do this to you.
Right. But what I'm saying is, I see where the greater force, when you have a fear, the greater force, sadly, is the capitalists who prey on that fear. Meaning that in my interaction with survivalists, if you watch videos, if you hit the YouTube channels and so forth, for some reason there's always advertisements about buying food.
Sure.
Buying their special shelter, types of tools and so forth. So it's always built on this capitalistic threshold.
There is no doubt that you're going to have people out there who will make a buck. And
Well,
that
they
is
see- but it's a
capitalism.
They see an open market, and I support anyone that wants to delve into this field. I know of a place that builds these bunkers. Depending on how much money you have, they will custom build a metal bunker
And
to drop
then-
into a hole in the
But
ground.
understand that because a person will capitalize on an opportunity and try to make a living from it doesn't trample anyone's rights. You have the right to say, screw off.
Right,
I don't
but
want to buy your stupid
in a way,
food.
they turn up the frequency. They turn up the fear factor.
So,
But
They-
that could be
that's what
nullified by
makes sales.
having an open and transparent, truly open and transparent government, which we do not have.
Oh, no, we don't.
And when they fall prey to these situations, Randy Weaver did not need to be nailed in a sting if they believed he was illegally running in weapons. They could have simply done normal police work and captured him.
Well,
But they didn't want to because they were trying to build a different case, which was to truncate individual freedoms. They did not want a bunch of people sitting up there in their own little fiefdom running things.
I thought it was fiefdom.
Fiefdom, doesn't matter. They wanted to dispel that notion in the minds of people.
But just as we have learned, and we become aware, the government has learned, and they become aware. And the reason we
The
don't...
government doesn't learn.
Oh,
Look at where
yes.
we are today.
Let me share this with you. Why do you think we turn on the news and we see a perspective in living color? We always see a perspective. We don't see what might be truth. We see a perspective that they want to show us. The news is loaded with vantage point.
Why do you think they're trying to do internet neutrality right now?
Tell me.
control.
Their version of it is to give everybody an equal share, because internet providers can essentially throttle the signal or bandwidth to customers, which they think is unfair. So they want to make it completely fair. Well, in order to make it completely fair, they want to make it like a public utility. So who's going to run the public utility? Well, the government will run
right.
the public utility. Therefore, it's not really public. It is a government utility. And in so
Goodbye.
doing, they control everything. They're the ones that are the gatekeepers. So what you then do
Now
is,
they
as you
become
are
the-
the gatekeeper,
Now they become the gatekeeper. They become the monitor.
Well, exactly.
They
That's
can
my
tell.
method.
They can say exactly where you've been on the internet, what you're looking at, what you're
and
saying.
they can determine
They can
what
already do that.
they can determine what information is to go on the internet. Okay, and quite frankly, a show such as this one would not be approved. Shows like this are not approved in China or Iran, or North Korea, which also control completely their internet from the government level. Okay, while the media may be simpering, sycophantic lapdogs of especially the more liberal governmental officials in Washington right now, the internet is not. The internet is still free. The internet is still the open range, evidenced by the fact that we have this program on the internet, and people can listen to our opinion. They can say whatever they want about us, but that's also part of the freedom of it. Whereas in China, that can't happen. In Iran, they will kill you. In North Korea, they just executed 10 internet bloggers for deeming to criticize policies within the North Korean government. These people are now room temperature, as you said, Lou, because they're doing less than what we're doing
So
here.
survivalists, we just added a different dimension to what a survivalist
it's all
is.
part of the survivalist
It's all part of their mentality. And
Well-
in that aspect, I understand
Mm-hmm.
the people that say, I want to go off the grid because I fear my government.
Right.
You see, and in this aspect of it, what's happened in the American society in the 50 years that I've been alive, that I've watched the American society, is somewhere along the line, society has forgotten one very simple fact is for the rule of government, our rule of government, and that is the United States Constitution serves to limit the power of government not limit the power of people. The founding fathers were very specific that government should always be afraid of its people.
Well, there's another dimension of the survivalist mentality, and that is, I think if you take a survey, most of them would believe very firmly in the U.S. Constitution. Would you say that's a yes or a no?
I would say more than likely most of them are constitutionalists.
Okay. The problem we're faced with today in not just our government, but the world, because we're joining a world power. We're trying to merge together as a world power. That everybody can see that.
Very much so.
Qualify who we.
We,
is.
meaning the governments at large right now. Everybody, the United Nations wants more power, but and right now the USA wants to be kind of like the leader in that pack.
See, I will challenge you on that score, because here's the deal: the United Nations is the afterbirth, if you will, of an earlier idea from a very progressive
League of
president
Nations, right.
named Woodrow Wilson with the League of Nations, which tried it, sputtered out because
Right.
it was an absolute joke. It ceded national sovereignty of the United States to a bunch of European potentates.
Agreed.
Screw that. We already went through the era of the Habsburgs and the Borgias. We didn't need to do that again.
Right,
But we're doing that now in the United Nations.
The United Nations was reconceived after World War II.
Agreed.
We'll take another shot at this absolute
Yeah,
debacle.
we're talking
and
an
these
entire
people have the
show.
temerity to put it in Manhattan.
I understand. They want the world to all be under one way of thinking. Well, I guess one world government. For instance, everyone would agree genocide's bad, right? Is that not true?
I would not say everyone would agree
Well,
with
I mean,
that.
what we would say is
I
enlightened governments.
I would agree with that statement.
Enlightened
personally.
government. Why do you think everybody's ticked off at Korea right now? North Korea. And the reason why is because you got a despot ruling his country the way he feels fit. And we know that it's morally wrong. So we want to impress that morality on the entire earth. In a sense, through the vehicle of morality, you can have a one world government. Everybody knows when you're doing something bad. It's real obvious when you're killing people or taking away certain rights that, like water. They should have
Maybe
water
not.
and
In
food.
North Korea, the information is so tightly regulated that the average run-of-the-mill citizen there does not even believe that Kim Jong-un goes to the bathroom. They believe that he is beyond such base
Understood.
material or corporeal functions.
Well, let me jump in here. I have a little bit of experience.
You don't go to the bathroom?
I got to spend 21 days in Beijing
Uh-huh.
in
that sounds like a movie.
in 1995, right after the Tiananmen Square massacre.
Right.
I mean, I'm talking maybe 2 months after this massacre happened. I was in Tiananmen Square. I seen the tank tracks. I seen the blood-stained concrete. But outside of the immediate people of Beijing, if you were to go into another province, say the Hunan province, and talk to the local farmer,
They had no idea.
they said it didn't happen because that's what the government told them.
Right.
And because they had no other form of information, none whatsoever, it was just simply, okay, it's all a lie, it's all fabricated, it didn't happen. Because the guy out farming his field only cares about farming his field.
Right. So let me show you where I'm going with this. We kind of got on a sidetrack about the Constitution.
No,
Just a
I think
little
the
bit.
Constitution factors in this heavily.
Well, the problem we're up against is as we become more of a one world government, which people don't want, and I agree with that, because you can't, cookie cut every person in the world and say this is the way you're going to act and think and behave.
Well, I can name a couple ministers that would be more than happy to help
Right.
form a one world government.
But there's two ways.
And breed red heifers.
Well, there's two ways this is being approached. One is through the ethic base, but another one is through the commerce. People realize, for instance, when they opened up eBay is a little bigger than people realize. eBay, the PayPal setup, they accomplished something that governments couldn't do, and that is commerce between so many different countries.
Still pest dispensers?
The point I'm trying to make is people realize that, hey, in the United States, you can sell X amount of product and reap so much in dollars.
Correct. But now
But if you
you're
open
getting-
up worldwide, you can reach a far greater audience. It's just like cigarettes.
well, you're getting into the Bitcoin.
Well, what I'm saying is in
Mentality.
cigarettes, they put a warning on the label. Cigarettes were curtailed tremendously during the 1970s and 80s of the campaigns, and it got worse. However, in China, the opposite occurred. There's a bigger base of buyers, and
Well,
the companies made
Quite frankly,
billions.
Quite frankly, the American tobacco producers marketed into the Asian continent.
They
Well,
made
because
billions.
You go where
Right.
the you go where you
well, you're in
can.
business.
So,
When you're in business, you go where money is.
So all of this relates to the Constitution. Here's where I'm going to go back to. The United States Constitution, we think of as an immovable object, written in stone, and it cannot be altered.
That is a conservative point of view.
Now,
that is not a liberal point of view.
where our current leadership is going, sadly, and the reason for this is what I mentioned before, for the world connection. They realize that the U.S. Constitution, they start calling it with terms like fluid.
Yeah, living and breathing.
It's a living and breathing document as opposed to written in stone. And the reason, and it seems so logical because we're growing as a nation. We're growing in intellect. We're not the type of people we were in the 1700s, the late 1700s.
There are some good things that have been
Right.
removed from the Constitution.
And so what they're saying is that we have to grow and expand as does the Constitution. Now, there is the good side to that, but the negative side to that is once you open up that doorway and you give powers to certain governmental leaders, you can't close it.
You can. It's difficult.
Well,
The legal mechanism is there.
really hard.
The first change to the Constitution, of course, were the First Amendments. Those were called amendments because the original Constitution
Didn't have them.
cover everything, and they quickly realized, hey, we got to add some stuff here because we didn't cover all of our bases. So they added the amendments to the Constitution, which we all regard as sacrosanct now, for good reason. But yeah, crap was added. The Dred Scott decision
Exactly.
back in 1858, I think it was.
No one's going to remember.
Maybe
So
59. I'm going off of memory.
But
that which stripped this man of his rights as a human being, not just as a citizen, as a human being,
right, but where I'm going with
which was later overturned.
Well, we get into the simple fact of at one point in time we rule through the Constitution that the American Indian could not own land because he was a savage and unchristian.
so stupid.
And that was ruling in 1879.
It is, and I confess one of the things that I didn't look at when I was doing research for the show was what the survivalist mindset is outside of the United States. I focused too much on the United States. I don't know if there is a survivalist mindset.
I don't
in
see a
other
lot of it.
countries.
From my research, I found very little idea, and for good reason. When we start going outside of the United States, and we get outside of main Europe, you start going into places like Chile and stuff.
Europe?
A lot of those people already live off the grid. And
Or
a
they're
lot of those,
so inculcated with the notion that there is no freedom that they don't consider it.
they don't consider it. And a lot of them are just some
Okay.
of these places, what we consider necessities of life, either don't exist or are so intermittent that they've adapted to the fact that, hey, there's going to be times I come home and I turn on the lights and nothing happens, and that's just the way it is today,
There's no
and keep
doubt
on going.
that survivalist mentality is a creature of the latter 20th century and into the 21st.
Well, let's look at two things I was trying to point towards. I was trying to show that the document, the Constitution, has to be eradicated or changed, and it's been changed, and it'll continue to be changed. But the survivalists,
You're talking about a constitutional convention, I believe.
right, well, survivalists have given up hope that the government's ever going to go back to the way it was, or in their minds, or will say, hey, you know what, we were wrong. So what a survivalist, if you're going to put X amount of dollars into buying property, into buying weapons, into, setting yourselves up for these particular situations that could occur, the grid goes down, whatever it might be. You've pretty much said that you believe that's what's going to happen. You've given up on legal processes, you've given up on hope, and you are betting your future that this is going to happen. So that's where you invest your dollars and your time, and they're very serious about it.
Sure.
Certain people will, I don't know why, I don't think it dawns on them, but they're not what I would call revelation survivalists, biblical survivalists. I think they're just simply human survivalists
wanting to just live their own lives.
Survive.
Yeah, they see a potential
Right,
problem, and they
because
see the only solution is to not be connected to what they see is going to collapse.
right, and so I know some guys, and this is just people I know, have 200, 300, 400 different types of guns.
I see nothing wrong with that.
And but I see, and then I say, how much ammo you got? Maybe 20,000 rounds, 30,000. I go, like, what are you expecting? And he says, well, you never know. And I said, if someone needs food, you're going to kill him? He goes, well, it might get really bad. It might get so bad that people wander on your property and you got to shoot them because they're going to want to take what you have.
That's why I mentioned the mid-millennial first mid-millennial feudal kings, because that's where they were. They're the ones that had the weaponry. They're the ones that had the skill. They could fight off the hordes. And so people flocked to them, and they were provided protection in exchange for their servitude.
What we're looking at is basically just before the fall of the Roman Empire.
It's a lot worse here. A lot worse here.
Really? We're looking at
this probably right after.
We're looking at right at the same scenario. The government hasn't quite collapsed. The mass doesn't know it. But once the government collapsed, once Rome collapsed, who rose up into power? We've all discussed this many times.
Yeah.
The Roman centurion that had a legion at his command that was no longer being was no longer being paid by Rome, and he said, "Men, look around. We control all this. This is ours. We will take it."
Oh, yeah.
And that is what happened.
Is before Vespasian took over the Roman emperor. During that tumult after Nero's death and the four, was it 3 or 4?
Three.
Vespasian cooled his heels in Spain, or Iberia, they call it.
He was over into Jerusalem
and,
when he took office. He was.
But I mean, he was
the first one in.
He cooled his heels and let all the rabble die down before he moved in, because he had control of his legions. They knew that they could trust him.
Go.
Yes, the Constitution had several amendments because the founding forefathers couldn't contain it all. They were smart enough to see that society would evolve and change. But they had some very basic principles that they saw that they didn't want the government to have an ability to infringe the people with. One of them was the right to practice their religion. It was very simple. Congress shall make no law regarding religion. Now, what were they saying? They were saying you're not going to establish a national church.
Yeah.
Because that's what they had been dealing with.
But, that's not a constitutional...
No, that's not being challenged. But what has been challenged is the Second Amendment and the misunderstanding of the Second Amendment. When the Second Amendment was written, that the rights of the people shall not be infringed to keep and bear arms, was for a very specific reason. What was going on? 1775, Britain declares a moratorium and confiscation of arms.
Well, because
because of the
Boston
Massacre,
we did not have a standing army.
You didn't have a right.
There wasn't anything like that.
As a colonist, you didn't have a right. Period. You were just simply a subject of the king.
Afterwards, the whole point of the Second Amendment was that we basically the citizens were to be called for.
Yes and no. We developed a standing army in World War II, or in the Revolutionary War.
Yes, but
we had blue coat regulars and we had militia. Now the idea of the militia was they could come up and support these trained soldiers at any given time when needed. They could be called upon, i.e. the Minutemen. But what the Founding Fathers saw was Britain had tried to take and confiscate firearms. And at that time, we're talking about the Brown Bess, the assault rifle of the 1700s.
Yeah.
It was accurate, it was deadly, and it was a 75 caliber, a ball that's 3/4 of an inch in diameter. So, if you want to get an idea of just how much devastation it could do to a human body.
Yeah, no, I've seen.
Yeah, a ball as opposed to a bullet.
Well, and 3/4 of an inch in diameter. We're talking a very big, heavy weight.
Big exit hole.
Yes, big exit hole. So what did the Founding Fathers say? We can't stop the people from holding arms because they might have to overthrow this government we're setting up. They didn't know, no one tried what we were trying to do.
Right, but as I was saying a few before we started, is that if the public is allowed to have arms, it, according to the Constitution, it would be equal to what the government has. So,
Yes.
in essence, a silo in your backyard. We all could have atomic weapons.
Yeah, if you could afford it.
Well, and I don't agree with that because
wait a minute.
there have to be
Let's-
reasonable limits, and that's pretty much understood.
Okay.
No, it's to be it's called a balance and to be fair. So in other words, the whole idea was so that the common people couldn't be taken over by bad leaders.
But see, here's the
Exactly.
deal. Here's the deal, and this is, I think, something that's being not understood, and that is the government, unlike other countries in this country, is of the people, by the people, and for the people. So,
Well, that
the
is our
government
that
is
is
a-
our proclamation and our ideal.
The government is a tool. And when we allow the government to deviate from its primary mission, yeah, it needs to be reined in. So when you're talking about, well, should the government have more powerful weapons than what are available to the common man?
I would say.
When you have the proper functioning of government, yes, because one of the government's main mandates is to protect our sovereignty from foreign powers.
That is its primary.
They need to be able to do that, whereas the common man is reliant upon the government to exercise that mandate when necessary.
And what happens?
But what happens is, and you have a situation like, for instance, the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits the United States military from using its might against its own citizens.
Right, they cannot
because
operate
we
within
have
U.S. bounds.
laws and a standing civilian police force to do that.
Well, what
So
happens when they do?
they're in violation of the Constitution.
And after you're dead, what do you do?
My point is that as the people, we are uneducated. Most people don't know their Constitution because, like the media, like the whole thing with Y2K, we listen to the wrong people. We don't educate ourselves. This is pervasive in our society. We have religious understanding today that is absolutely screwed up because we listen to pastors who know just enough to be dangerous behind the pulpit. And that is the truth. And so they propagate error. They list it as fact. People go forth. They believe the wrong thing, and they create more havoc. Well, the government does the same thing. When you have media personalities, for example, on CNN or MSNBC, why they are on the air is absolutely a mystery to me.
I'm jumping.
And I know that there's a lot of liberals out there who are screaming at me or are probably already turned off the computer. MSNBC is a joke even within the industry, and you all know it.
Okay, let's just taking on MSNBC right now.
A ghastly,
Just
ghastly
taking
network.
this on. If any of you support this, please write into our webpage, email me. I want to hear you defend Al Sharpton being a commentator and a reporter. If any of you have ever watched his show, he cannot pronounce the words that are on the teleprompter.
Oh, just beyond that, just
He
the
cannot.
ideology is
He
just...
does not speak clearly. He doesn't convey an idea.
But resist we much. We must. They're all jitty about a shutdown. The tortoise in the race, then co-author of Hubris. U2 lead singer Bono, Sigourney Weaver, the show Rush Lombard hosts. Is Mike Muckery.
He doesn't do anything that's required of a reporter, but we give this man the show because of one reason.
And
Really?
what's that?
Because I don't know what it is.
He supports the same liberal view set as the people that run and own the stations.
Well, you know what? Getting back to survivalists.
Well, it seems like we
jump off
digress,
this.
but this is all part and parcel of it because survivalists are aware of the fact that their government is basically being run by
Well, this is what they see.
oligarchs.
So they've given up.
To a degree, yeah. And they've taken matters into their own hands.
Some of them give up and some of them hold on to hope that the Constitution can be reestablished and reinforced. They believe, let's get to the next step. But at the same time, they have the nickname Prepper for a reason.
Yeah, but
let's be prepared if it fails.
My vexation here is this. I don't understand the Christian survivalists.
I do not understand.
Well, very easy to understand. From
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me,
Okay,
please.
wait a minute.
I don't know.
Before we get into this, if we're going to talk about survivalists and the TV show, there's a couple TV shows out there about people that prepare for doomsday. And if you watch them, this person believes
I've
in...
tried it. It's just, it really does, it pushes
Yeah,
me to the edge.
it to me, it's like I'd rather have my teeth drilled without painkillers.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but...
when you watch the show, you'll see, I believe that the world is going to be exposed to a worldwide pandemic. And so they prepare for that one scenario. They'll have a clean room to wash off the radiation in this bunker because they believe that an atomic bomb is going to land within 100 miles of their home. But they don't tackle what would happen should an earthquake come and split the land underneath their home. They don't tackle what would happen if a flood happens. So a lot of these preppers, these doomsday preppers that are become quite popular, I look at and I scratch my head and it's like, if you're going to prep, do some basic stuff. We brought up Y2K.
Just because it was recent and most people remember.
Very much so. But
the chaos that was
my view,
fomented.
What I did with my view, I mean, everybody talked about Y2K that had any type of friends at the time. And my view was simple. I had several people ask me what I thought. As an electrician, I was going through this town, putting in generator transfer switches and automatic run generators everywhere. 2 and 3 a day. 5 to 6 days a week. Did I think it was? My house still doesn't have a transfer switch. I still don't have a generator. So I finally had some people ask me what I thought. And I said, look, if Y2K does happen with the scenarios they've given, you're not going to be able to buy toilet paper for a while. You're not going to be able to buy your favorite meat for a while. So have something prepared that you can go to for storage, but if it doesn't happen and busts, you didn't spend $50,000 in a semi-truck container full of MREs.
And that concludes this week's program. We will resume with part 2 of this fascinating topic on survivalists and the apocalypse next week. So forth,
Lou Rogers,
Mark Wilson,
and Dave Cameron, who didn't make it to this one. I am Chase Rockwell, saying so long until next time you find yourself across the cosmos.
Send any questions or comments to us via email at info@acrossthecosmos.com. Also, visit us on the web at